Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we are very thankful that you take time from your busy day to join us. Before we get into our material today, I have to make a comment about a show that I watched on the History Channel recently. And what it was basically a damage control, if you would, of the events of 9/11. I took the time, as frustrating as the show was because of the lies, the half-truths, and the false leads. I had to take the time to watch the show because my hopes of watching the program was that the History Channel would present factual evidence and not misleading propaganda. Unfortunately, I was very, very disappointed because what the program really was an organized coercion of, like I said, of lies and half-truths and really not presenting evidence in its full facts. The program did make one thing stick in my mind, and that was that we are having a effect. There is an old saying that a dear friend of mine who was in the Army Air Corps, and said that you only receive flack when you're over the target. And for them to put out such a production at such a cost and effort proves to me that we as a whole are having an effect with regards to awakening and educating the American citizens as to the events of 9/11. And I just wanted to add that before we went any further, because I think if you get on the History Channel and you do watch that program, and you compare it to the evidence that not only we have presented on this show, but many other shows like it, from people that were there, from documentation, from footage, from eyewitness accounts and so forth, I think the lies and the innuendos will stand out right in front of you and make you wonder why the History Channel would broadcast such a program and what their cause for doing it was. So with that being said, first of all, I want to thank everybody out there for watching. We have had a tremendous amount of feedback from people who are watching the program, and some of them had a question, particularly Steve. I want to thank you, Steve, for watching. But Steve asked me, he said, Tom, a couple of times you have mentioned that we do not own our property. He says, and I thought about this. He said that basically he wondered why, okay, we don't own our property, and is this the reason why all the information, including the mortgage information and so forth, is of public record? Well, to answer your question, Steve, it is. If something was in your ownership, remember at one time we got into the different titles that we have. We have certificate of title, certificate meaning bearer use of, someone's allowing you to use this, and how the person who issues the certificate is really the controller. It sets the terms and so forth, the value of this certificate, and what kind of homage has to be, if any, has to be paid to the person who actually controls the ownership of that certificate. So we also got into it one show about the difference between certificate of title and a allodial title, and this, Steve, is where this all comes into play, okay? When you go to the town clerk's office and you record your deed, you literally, ownership is going to that corporation that the town clerk is a part of, and we've gotten into the language of what a corporation is, and we'll review that real quick from our Black's Law Dictionary. But what it is that we used to have a allodial title. Allodial is Latin for absolute, meaning that we owned it. It was ours. In old days, folks, what you did was you kept your deed in your safe. And then, if it was like owning the title to your car. If I'm going to sell you, excuse me, my car, I'm merely going to sign it over to you as an endorsement. And that's exactly how it was with land. What's taken place is that the land has been liened through the bankruptcy of the corporation that you know as the United States government. We did get into on March 9th, 1933, how the corporation that we call the United States government went bankrupt to a foreign bank that we know as the Federal Reserve Banking System. We got into the definition of what money is and what money is not, and we came to the obvious conclusion that we our medium of exchange that we call dollars, number one, is not a dollar as compared to the coinage acts of the founding era of this country. And number two, that even by the definition in law of what money is, we do not have money. So we're going to get into that a little bit, but the whole thing comes down to the bankruptcy. Federal Reserve Act took place December 23rd, 1913. It basically only took these people 16 years to bankrupt a very prosperous sovereign nation. So let's get into a little bit of the legalities of where we are and why, and some history as to why we are here. But I thought it'd be interesting to let's review at the end of the War of Independence, you know it as the Revolutionary War, what did the courts and what did the King of England pertain to the rights and or sovereignty of the American people. So I'd like to read two quotes from you. This is all from law, okay? And this is when the king signed the Treaty of Paris. And this is what the king said. And this is on land and rights, okay? This is the king himself. The king said, in all land and rights therein, and in the former colonies that were transferred not to the government of the colonies, but to the people of the colonies. This made all of the citizens of the colonies sovereign. People of a state are entitled to all rights which formerly belonged to the king by his own prerogative. So basically what is going on here is the King of England is relinquishing all his royalties, all his rights that he had control of prior to the war taking place, and he's giving them to not the government of the United States, not the corporation of the United States, but to the people of the colonies. Again, as he says, which all rights which formerly belonged to the king by his own prerogative. And if you want to look this up, you can go into the Treaty of Paris, and it's rather interesting. But also in Lansing versus Smith, this is a case law. At the time of the Revolution, the sovereignty devolved on the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of the country. But they are sovereigns without subjects and have none to govern but themselves. The citizens of America are equal as fellow citizens and as joint tenants in their sovereignty. Now, that actually comes from Crystal Express versus Georgia. And when you look at this language, what it's telling you basically is that, number one, we're all equal under law. Remember, we're a republic, not a democracy. We get into the difference between a republic and a democracy. Basically, 51% can tell the other 49% what they're going to do, and that's what we know as a democracy. But in a republic, we are all equal under law. Okay, the other 51% cannot tell the other 49% what to do because we're sovereign unto the law, unto ourselves, and our status under this law is of equal. Everybody has of equal responsibilities and of equal rights. So it's very important that we understand that we were the sovereigns unto ourselves. Okay, we created the government, the state government. The state government created the federal government. And because we were the creator, we hold a superior position to both of these governmental entities. How did this get flip-flopped? How did this get turned around now where if you think you're free, go ahead and try to build a house in most places without a permit. Go try to acquire work without filling out the paperwork of a private corporation we know is the Internal Revenue Service. And I did say private corporation. The IRS in courts has been proven to be an entity of the Federal Reserve banking system, which is a private foreign corporation, which we have covered many times on this show. So how did we get to this point where all the sacrifices that were made by our founding fathers, we won the battles, the war, we won the political objectives, and we were sovereign unto ourselves under an equal status? Obviously, that is not the case today. Today, the federal government is of superior positions even above the states, and the state is even above the people. So we have to ask ourselves, well, what took place? How did this get flip-flopped? Why did the people accept it? Were the people educated that this was going on? Or were the people slowly, these powers were usurped from the people, and of course the usurpers were the people behind the government. Government has and is a tool of the bankers. We have demonstrated this quite well with the Bankers Manifesto that we read verbatim to you in previous shows. So let's get into what actually took place there. Now, when you look into the term United States, what is the United States? Well, it's interesting. Let's go to Black's Law Dictionary, and you will find that the United States actually has three definitions. And I won't read the whole thing. It's quite a lengthy term here, but I'm going to give you the brief variants of this. This term has several meanings. This is United States, Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, page 1703. This term has several meanings. It may merely mean the name of a sovereign occupying corporation, the position analogs to that of other sovereigns in a family of nations. It may designate territory over which the sovereignty of the United States extends, or it may be the collective name of states which are united by and under the Constitution. So there's three definitions here of what the United States is. We have the corporation that we deal with usually in an inferior position every day. We have the territory that makes up, the physical territory that makes up the United States. And when you go back to the founding era, folks, the federal government was not supposed to be involved in the states, as we've proven on this show through documentation. The federal government was supposed to be involved in territories, enclaves, and districts only, okay? As in the Washington, D.C., which is District of Columbia. I call it the District of Criminals, which is what it is. But they weren't supposed to have this encroachment into the workings and the happenings at the state level. Because don't forget, the states created the federal government, so the federal government is supposed to be in an inferior position to the states. So, and then we have the Union, the 50 states that make up the United States, all right? Now, when you go back to the original Constitution, you will notice that when it says United States, that the U is in lowercase. In other words, the U in United States is not capitalized. And go back to basic English, okay? If something is a noun, person, place, or thing, it's capitalized. But in the sense of when the Founding Fathers were writing up the United States, the United was an adjective describing the position of the states. The states were united. The word states was capital because it was a person, place, or thing. So it's very important that you understand that. So when you get a document from the federal government and the U is uppercase, all right, what they're saying to you, it basically is that this is the corporation you're communicating with. This is not the sovereign union of the United States that makes up the 50 states. This is not the territory, the geographical, physical territory of the United States. This is the corporation United States that you are communicating with. And this could be, you know, uppercase USA, uppercase US, all that. And that's what makes this definition so lengthy, because it gets into all this in the Law Dictionary. All represents the corporation. Now, what have we learned about the corporation so far? Obviously, we've learned that the corporation went bankrupt on March 9th, 1933. So we also learned at the corporation that after the Lieber Codes to the Reconstructionist Acts of 1865 and 67, we learned that the people of the United States changed their standing in law through the usurped powers of the federal government. We all became what's called 14th Amendment citizens. And through the 14th Amendment, basically, folks, what they did was they took the black people off of the private plantation and put everybody on the federal plantation. That's exactly what took place. So what happened with this bankruptcy, and we're going to get into this right now, was that the government said to the private bank, Federal Reserve, through the International Monetary Fund, Roosevelt declared the National Banking Holiday Act, nice word for being robbed and pillaged, but what they did was they confiscated all the gold and silver on the private possession of the American people under the threat of law, okay, and punishment of law. They leaned the public trust. And so what took place after that, the debt still wasn't enough to cover the debt. Well, the only thing that the corporation had left was the people, you and I, our labors. This is where the birth certificate comes into play. When we reviewed the word certificate, it really had two meanings. One, it holds intrinsic value, and it means bearer use of. Someone is allowing you to use an entity through this certificate for your use, but you don't control the terms of this use. You don't control the value of this certificate. So it's important that you understand your position to this corporation that went bankrupt on March 9th, 1933. This is why we work for Federal Reserve notes. Remember we looked up the word note, an acknowledgement of debt? This is the reason why. This is what happened to our law system. We are no longer under a common law system. We are under a commercial law system. And let's get into a little bit about the money and the law system itself, what happened with this bankruptcy. Now, if you're in a commercial law system, which we are, and we are bonded, which we are through this birth certificate, okay, then what you've got to understand is that if you're in a commercial law system, you can either be a debtor or a creditor. If there's a bond issued against you, take one guess what you are in the eyes of the law. You are a debtor. So with this, in fact, if you're a debtor, can you own physically and correctly through the eyes of law, own anything? No, obviously not. You have to be a creditor. But the bond prohibits you from being a creditor. So with our money system, you remember in previous shows we had a silver certificate, a true dollar from the Kennedy administration. We get into Executive Order 11110. Very easy to remember. Please look it up. 2 11s and a 0. And what we discovered was that Kennedy was issuing silver certificates. So this dollar, a true dollar, had intrinsic value because put aside was silver to maintain the intrinsic value of this medium of exchange that we know as a dollar. But today, we have these Federal Reserve notes, all right? And we got over the two signatures, how one down below, Secretary of the Treasury and Treasurer of the United States. You would think they're the same position. No, one's the creditor from the Federal Reserve, and the other one's the debtor from the insolvent corporation that you know as the United States. That's why there's two signatures on the bottom of what we call the dollar. Of course, it's not a dollar. It's a Federal Reserve note. So in the eyes of the law, let's look at what the definition of money is and what it is not. In its usual and ordinary acception, it means gold, silver, or paper money used as a circulating medium of exchange and does not embrace notes, bonds, or evidence of debt. Folks, what are we using for our medium of exchange? Is it money? No. It says right on this instrument, it is legal tender by decree. Okay, legal tender is by decree. The king, the government, excuse me, whatever, is forcing you to use this instrument as a medium of exchange. The private Federal Reserve, we've got into the mechanics of our money system, the fiat currency, the fractional banking system. And if you've missed these shows, folks, please go to www.katv.org and you can see all these shows and you can catch up to where we are. But it's very important that you have a foundation of this knowledge. And you'll never look at the dollar or the Federal Reserve note again. And when you look at your children's birth certificate, and you get the main one from the Office of Vital Statistics, and you go down to the lower left-hand corner, in very small print, you will see one of two companies. You will see the Midwest Bank Note Company, or you will see the North American Bank Note Company. Now, you have to go to the Office of Vital Statistics, and you have to get a copy of the original one. I have a copy of my bond from the Midwest Bank Note Company. And in law, this creates an entity called a nom de guerre. Okay, a commercial entity. Now we've touched on this in earlier shows to some degree, but basically, this is the artificial person, the corporate entity being developed. So the corporation will have you in corporate law, in commercial law, to communicate and/or regulate you. Because let me put it this way: if I'm a member of, say, the Moose Club, and you're not a member of the Moose Club, do the laws and bylaws of the Moose Club affect you? Obviously not. They affect me. I'm a member of that club. And it works the same way in law. If you're not under, and what in law is called jurisdiction, if you are not under their jurisdiction, they have no means, they have no avenue to regulate and or communicate with you. So this is what the bankruptcy did. The bankruptcy not only changed our law system, which we're going to get into, it not only changed our money system, which we have gotten into in other shows, but it also created the artificial corporate entity known as a nom de guerre, or a person. Do you remember we went over the definition of person at one time? And I know from some of the comments that we've received, a lot of people were shocked by it. Let me see if we can find this real quick here. But basically, a person is a corporate entity, okay? This is another lengthy definition, but here we go. The word a person, a man considered according to the rank he holds in society, which all the right to which the place he holds entitles him, and the duties which it imposes. That's the natural person, and it continues here. The word in its natural and usual signification includes women as well as men, okay? Now, when we get into corporate law, and we come down here, the term may also, now this is Black's Law Dictionary, page 4th edition, page 1299. The term may also include artificial beings such as corporations. Now this is People versus Commerce of Commissioners of Taxes, 23 New York, 242, quasi-corporations and so forth. And if you start studying this, folks, you will see that a corporation is a person. So when the judge is speaking to you, are you Thomas D'Ambra? And when you look at the court documents, it's all uppercase black ink. You remember how we get into that in previous shows? We got into the Selective Service trifold pamphlet right at the very top. Big, bold letters, uppercase black ink only. And that's the reason because, again, they're contracting with this corporate entity, okay? So it's important that you understand, and I got into the one time, one of the shows about how I was watching this case in a courtroom, and a woman, very, very strong and knowledgeable woman, got up and said, I'm not a person. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this is crazy. I'm looking at a woman standing in front of me. This was years ago. Did not understand what this woman was getting at, but obviously the judge knew right away what she was talking about because things got very flip-flop, and we don't have the time to get into that particularly, but you got to understand that it's a language of deception. So when they're calling you, are you not Thomas D'Ambra? And you're thinking, yeah, I'm Thomas D'Ambra. The judge is speaking to you as a corporate entity. Very important that you understand that. So with the bankruptcy, we've gotten into the money, what we don't have for money, which is very, very important. But what is a corporation is something that we need to know. And let's go right to the law dictionary. A corporation in reference to municipal corporations and especially to their powers of taxation. A corporate purpose is one which shall promote the general prosperity and the welfare of the municipality. Now, is it saying, see, you may, again, deception here, say, oh, well, the municipality is you and I for the good of the people. Is that really what this definition is saying? No. Who is the corporation looking out for? In reference to municipal corporations and especially to their powers of taxation. A corporate purpose is one which shall promote the general prosperity and the welfare of the municipality, of the corporation. The corporation is looking out for the benefit of the corporation. All right, Kelo versus Bridgeport. The famous case took place about 2 or 3 years ago in Connecticut. If you're not familiar with it, I'll be real brief with it, but what happened was these people falsely believed they owned their land, like most Americans, okay? And what they did was the city of Bridgeport said, we're going to evict you out of your house. We're not going to give you fair market value for it, and for the good of the corporation. So what took place was the people went to the Supreme Court of the federal Supreme Court of the United States. It went to the state courts and got bumped and got bumped. Well, what the court came back with is basically the people lost. They were evicted out of their homes at no compensation, and the reason being is because the corporation owns the land. And the corporation has every right to do with that land what it wants. So you don't have to go back to March 9th, 1933 to discover this. You can read it in today's newspapers. And that very important case, again, was called Kelo versus Bridgeport, Connecticut. Go on the internet and research that. Look at the decision of the judges. And you say, well, this is crazy. This is ludicrous. It is. But this is a good example of the inferior and superior positions in law regarding the people, the true natural people of this country, the sovereigns of this country, and the government, the insolvent corporation of this country. And it's important that you understand that. So when we get into corporation, let's continue with this. It goes down, it comes down here, and then there's another definition. There's multiple definitions of a corporation. Again, this is Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, page 409, corporation. An artificial person or legal entity created by or under the authority of the laws of a state or nation, or composed in some rare instances of a single person and his successors by the incumbents of a particular office, but ordinarily consisting of an association of numerous individuals who subsist as a body politic under a special denomination. Okay? So when you're contracting with the government, or you're contracting in the courtroom, this is who they are addressing. This is who they are contracting with. This is who they are communicating with. This is who they are threatening. Okay? An artificial person or legal entity created by or under the authority of the laws of a state or nation. This is who you are. When you take out your driver's license, and I don't care what state you're from, look at how the name is printed out. It's uppercase black ink. I don't care what state you're from, because they are contracting with the nom de guerre, the corporate entity, the artificial person. Remember we went through the definition of person? Okay? Now we go to the definition of a corporation, and wow, isn't that interesting? They both coincide with each other. And that's the reason why. Okay? So back to Steve's questions about how did we lose control of our property. The public trust was lien, the gold and silver was taken. They create the birth certificate. Now, people say, okay, we're bonded. What's the value of that bond? And let me get into that a little bit. Basically, what took place is this. The insurance company has an index that's known as the Brown's Index. And you can look this up, please do. And basically, the Brown's Index before They've changed the definition since, but before what it was they took the average age that the average white married male died. Because at the time, the male was the breadwinner. We still had family structure in this country. And the average white married male, if you would, was the breadwinner. Okay? So a gentleman by the name of Brown, they called hence the Brown's Index, he said, okay, when does that average person die? And then that's how they prorate life insurance policies up to the age of 100. This is how they come up with the formula as to how much you have to pay for your premium for the insurance coverage, okay, for life insurance. So what they did was they used this index and they went a step farther with it and they said, okay, when does the average white married, how much will the average white married male earn in this time period? Think of that. Very interesting concept. So with this, they issued a bond against that number. Now, I know you're going to say, well, come on, Tom, you know, things change, college educated and so forth, and not having a college education and so forth. But again, you have to understand this is an average. They took all this into account, and they formed an average. Now, I will tell you, because the devaluation of what we call the dollar, the average person earns more today in the sheer number of dollars. Of course, his purchasing power has decreased dramatically. I think we've gotten to the point that we're down to 2% currently. So, and that's 2% of the purchasing power that what a true dollar had in 1913 when the private bank, we know as the Federal Reserve, took over. So they come up with this index and they said, okay, the average person, now it's the, they don't use that formula anymore with regards to white married male. They have put this whole thing together to include all of us. They come up with this number, and they issued a bond against it, okay? And this is why in a commercial law system, we're working for Federal Reserve notes, an acknowledgement of debt. Commercial law system, bonded, debtor, note, an acknowledgement of debt. You see how it all works out and how it's laid out in front of us? We just never take the time to research the language. And again, the language is all deception. And this is what we try to do in the show, is get by the points of deception. So what have we got so far? We have a definition of the United States which entitles the Union, the 50 states, the territory thereof, and the corporation. We, folks, on a daily basis, are dealing with the corporation. So let's continue with that. So then the corporation goes bankrupt to a private foreign bank that we know as the Federal Reserve banking system. Now this is this, and how we went into the mechanics, but I'll be very layman here. Basically, folks, what happens with our money system is this. It's fiat. It's based on nothing, okay? And what they do is this. The Treasury Department makes a request to the Federal Reserve private bank that we wish to print X amount of Federal Reserve notes, not dollars. For the sake of argument, we'll call them dollars right now. And so, because you know them as dollars, but they're not, and we've proven that. And so then the Treasury makes the request. The Federal Reserve merely makes an entry on a ledger. It gives permission for the Treasury to print the money, and the presses roll on. Of course, for every dollar they print, what happens? There's more of them, so the purchasing power decreases. And so then what goes on is that we go into debt, an interest bond debt, to a private foreign bank that merely makes an entry on a ledger and gives us permission to print our own money. Think of how ludicrous that is. Remember the famous quote about Lincoln about the prerogative, the number one prerogative of the government is the issuance of currency. We also got into the Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, where only the Congress can regulate the value thereof, and it must have intrinsic value in species of gold and silver. Then we got into the Coinage Acts of 1789 and 1791, precisely what a dollar was. Remember that? And it was 25.8 grains of gold and a 15-to-1 ratio of silver. Okay, that's all gone, folks. The gold and silver have been taken from us. All right? And so now we use this fiat, excuse me, currency that we know as Federal Reserve notes. So the corporation, again, the United States, the corporation goes bankrupt to these foreign bankers through manipulation of the currency, obviously. And what took place was some very, very dramatic things in this country. One, our money system changed. Two, our law system changed. Okay. So, again, Steve, be patient. We're getting to your answer, but we have to lay out the foundation as how we got on this road and why we're traveling down it. So here we go. March 9th, 1933. And I'm just going to read a quote here. Folks, everything I'm about to read from you, excuse me, is all from the Congressional Record. All right? So you can look all this up yourself. I will give you, I'm going to do, there's too much material here for me to read this whole thing, but I'm going to give you precise language, and then I'm going to give you some legal summaries that were done through the Supreme Court. But again, you can find all this at the Congressional Record. Now, this is what we're going to talk about here is a special report on the national emergency in the United States of America. And if you look at this, you'll see that the U is uppercase. Okay, very important that we understand that. This is called Senate Report 93-549. I'm going to say that again so you can look it up on the internet. Senate Report 93-549, War and Emergency Powers Act. Okay? Now, what takes place is basically the corporation is going insolvent to the bankers, and in doing so, it is declaring a state of emergency, and through the state of emergency, it is declaring powers that were not delegated to the federal government by the enabling acts of the Constitution. Okay? So that's why they're calling this War and Emergency Power Act, Senate Report 93-549. Now, I just want to read this quick quote. A majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule. For 40 years, freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have, in varying degrees, been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. The problem of how a constitutional democracy reacts to great crisis, however, from antedates the Great Depression. As a philosophical issue, its origins reach back to the Greek city-states and the Roman Republic. In the United States, actions taken by the government in times of great crisis have, from at least the time of the Civil War, in important ways shaped the present phenomenon of a permanent state of national emergency. Now, a couple of things to jump out here. First of all, why are they bringing up the Civil War? Well, what they're bringing up, folks, is what we talked about earlier, the Lieber Codes, okay, and the use of executive orders directly on the people of the Union, the United States. Folks, executive orders were not developed to be used as policymakers against the American people. Executive orders were supposed to be used in times of emergency for the delegation of orders to federal employees. All right? This is exactly what this was meant to be. Now, I know a lot of people have different thoughts on Abraham Lincoln, but Abraham Lincoln was the first president to use executive orders to create policy on the American people. Some of you may not like me saying that, but don't be mad at me. This is just history. And this is what they're talking about with regards to the Civil War. The Reconstructionist Acts. What they reconstructed our form of government. Okay? Excuse me. So this document says here for 40 years, well, this document was written in 1973. And nothing has changed. As a matter of fact, we've gone deeper down this rabbit hole. So that's why they're talking about the 40 years, all right? And antedates the Great Depression. Well, folks, the money mechanism was what crises, remember the Hegelian dialect, problem, reaction, solution, was what crises they used to bring about and usurp this power in their own hands.
Okay, so one thing I took issue with, folks, was a constitutional democracy. Now, we have gotten into this at great length in previous shows, but we are not a democracy. We are a republic. I pledge allegiance to the flag, to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. So, this congressman is making this quote here. His name is Frank Church. And I want to continue with this report. Since March 9th, 1933, the declared bankruptcy, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. In fact, there are now in effect 4 presidential proclaimed states and statutes of national emergency. In addition to the national emergency declared by President Roosevelt in 1933, when we went bankrupt, there are also the national emergency proclaimed by President Truman on December 16, 1950, during the Korean conflict, and the states of national emergency declared by President Nixon on March 23, 1970, and August 15, 1971. These proclamations give force to 470 provisions of federal law. I will tell you, folks, this document was written in 1973, and according to numerous sources, there's not only 470 provisions now, and a provision is a nice word for mandate, but there are actually about 1,200 of them now. And that's not including the Patriot Acts, the Homeland Security Acts, and the Victory Acts, and so forth. Okay? This is just through the declaration of emergency powers. Okay, let's continue. These hundreds of statutes delegate to the President extraordinary powers ordinarily exercised by the Congress, which affects the lives of all American citizens in a host all-encompassing manners. This vast range of powers taken together confer enough authority to rule the country without reference to normal constitutional processes. Folks, this is where we are today. The Constitution, and I can basically show you this in law, and we will at some point, but we've got a lot more of a foundation to cover before we get to that point. The Constitution, folks, is basically null and void. Remember when George Bush said publicly, and I quote, excuse my language, the Constitution is just a goddamn piece of paper. This was a public statement by the President of the United States. And basically that's exactly what it is. Okay, we are not under a common law system, hence the Constitution. We are not under a money system of intrinsic value, hence the Constitution. So you gotta understand, folks, and again, we have a long way to go to get to this point, how this came about, but it began with the Reconstructionist Acts and the Lieber Codes, and basically, the Lieber Codes, folks, make up about the first 100 executive orders that were used against the people to reconstruct the government, to take the federal government into a superior position regarding the states. Okay. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the President may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize any and all commodities, assign military forces abroad and domestically. Okay, very important you understand that. Institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communications, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict any and all travel, and in a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all the American citizens. This is a forward from the congressional record on the congressional floor of Senate document 93-549. Let me read that again to you. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the President may seize property, organize and control the means of any and all production, seize any and all commodities, assign military forces abroad and domestically, institute martial law, seize and control any and all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict any and all travel, and in a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all American citizens. Land of the free? What are they telling you right here? Do you have rights? No. You have privileges. Remember we went over in previous shows the definition between privileges and rights? Okay. What does our founding documents tell us? Our founding documents tells us that our rights are unalienable. They belong to us. They're given from God. They're not created by the state. Remember we got into how the Constitution was a mandate on the federal government, what the Constitution can, what the federal government can and can't do, not what you can and can't do. They've turned this around also, but what the federal government can do. And we also came to the conclusion that the federal government was supposed to be involved in 3 agencies: Treasury, Defense, and Judicial. Name something you can do in your life that the government is not involved with. You can't. Okay? So it's important that you understand this. And I've digressed a little bit, but I want to get into, for sake of time, and this is the congressional record again. Okay? President Lincoln knew that he had no authority to issue any executive order upon the American people, and thus he commissioned General Orders Number 100. And folks, this is in April 24th, 1863, as a special field code to govern his actions under martial law, excuse me, and which justified the seizure of power, which extended the laws of the District of Columbia, and which fictionally implemented the provisions of Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 17 through 18 of the Constitution beyond the boundaries of Washington, D.C., and into the several states. Okay, this is where the encroachment took place, the usurpation of powers. This is where it began, folks, all the way back in 1863 through a self-declared proclamation by President Lincoln, all right, known as the Lieber Codes. So this battle has gone on for quite a while. Now, some people in history will say that Lincoln had all intentions of bringing the Union back to its original form and state. That we'll never know. Lincoln never got the opportunity to do such. But it shows you right here, number one, that initially the states were sovereign. They were a separate entity unto the federal government, and the states held a superior position to the federal government. This document here is quite plainly showing you where the encroachment and when the encroachment took place. General Orders Number 100, also called the Lieber Instructions and or the Lieber Code, extended the laws of war and international law onto the American soil, and the United States government became the presumed conqueror of the people and the land. Now, remember that initial statement we made about the statement from the king when the Treaty of Paris was signed? Okay, who owned the land? Who was sovereign unto himself? The American people. What did Abraham Lincoln do? Abraham Lincoln usurped the power and extended it and gave it fully to the federal government without any vote of Congress, just through executive privilege. And Lincoln was the first president to do this, and this has continued ever since. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, either the divide paradigm on the left or the divide paradigm on the right, the Republican or the Democrats, it doesn't matter. This is continued today. Martial rule was kept secret and has never ended. The nation has been ruled under martial law by the commander-in-chief of that military, the president, under his assumed executive powers and according to his executive orders. Constitutional law under the original Constitution is enforced only as a matter of keeping the public peace under the provisions of General Orders Number 100 under the martial law rule. Under martial law, title is a mere fiction, since all property belongs to the military except for that property which the commander-in-chief may, in his benevolence, exempt from taxation and seizure upon which he allows the enemy to reside. So now, folks, you're not only in an inferior position, but we're going to continue reading here, you are declared the enemy of the corporation. Key word should jump out at you there, enemy. And it's the same thing with these Homeland Security Acts and the Victory Acts and the Patriot Acts. Folks, as we've stated from the very beginning, and as it's
authors had stated from the very beginning through the PNAC documents and so forth. This was all geared to the enemy of the United States government. Who's the enemy of the United States government? You. And we're going to get into that right now. Okay. For sake of time, I'm going to bypass a couple things here. We can come back to it later on, but I want to finish this so we make sure you understand this. In 1917, the Trading with the Enemy Act, Public Law 65-91, 65th Congress, Section 1, Chapters 105 to 106, October 16, 1970, was passed, in which defined and regulated and punished trading with the enemies, who were then required by that act to be licensed by the government to do business. You remember we got into the Union Bank? We got into the Union Bank, and this was the act that the Union Bank, who financed Adolf Hitler through the Reich Bank of Germany, this is the act that that bank was confiscated with in 1943. Okay? And this is the bank that Prescott Bush was the fund manager between the Union Bank of New York and the Reich Bank of Germany. Remember we got into that in documented history? Yes, Prescott Bush, the grandfather of number 43, President number 43. He was the fund manager between the Union Bank of New York that funded the Nazi movement in Germany and the Reich Bank of Germany. Okay, but let's continue here. The National Banking System Act, Public Law 73-1, 73rd Congress, Section 1, Chapter 1, March 9th, 1933. Boy, this March 9th, 1933 keeps coming out. You know why? This is when we went bankrupt. This is when the corporation went bankrupt, okay? Executive Order Proclamation 2038, March 6, 1933, Executive Order Proclamation 2039, March 9, 1933, and Executive Orders 6073, 6102, 6111, and 6260 state that in 1933 the United States government, formed under the executive privilege of the original martial law rule, went bankrupt, and a new state of national emergency was declared, which the United States citizens were named as the enemy to the government and the banking system as per the provisions of the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1933. And if you want to look this up in case law, this is a Supreme Court decision in the case of Erie Railroad Company versus Tompkins, 304 U.S., Section 64, Edition 1188. Let me read that again to you, real quick. Executive Orders 6073, 6102, 6111, and 6260. That in 1933, the United States government, formed under the executive privilege of the original martial law rule, this is the one that goes back to Lincoln, okay, went bankrupt, and a new state of national emergency was declared, under which the United States citizens were named as the enemy to the government and the banking system as per the provisions of the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1933. And what they're talking about, the Trading with the Enemy Act, folks, is basically what took place, that in 1917 they had the Trading with the Enemy Act, so they had some kind of legal jurisdiction to prosecute people found doing business with the supposed enemies of the United States. And they amended that in 1933 after the bankruptcy, excuse me, and you were declared the enemy of the United States and the banking system therein. Folks, this is from the congressional record. This is not a fiction. This is not a facade. This is real, okay? So what we've got to do, folks, is, I'm sorry to continue this for the sake of time, and Steve especially. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to watch next week, because we're going to start right here next week, and then we're going to get into how we lost control of our property and why we don't own it anymore. With that being said, folks, I am very thankful. We are all very thankful that you take the time from your busy day to watch us. Please join us next week when we will answer Steve's question, and we ask you, as always, to remember that your government is your responsibility. Thank you for watching.